Welcome to Second Table, where we discuss spirituality, philosophy, and psychology. I'm your host, Winston Janis. Welcome back, everyone, to the Second Table podcast. Thanks for joining us. Today I'm with Brian McLaren. So excited to be with him. And for those of you that aren't familiar, Brian McLaren is a prolific author, speaker, activist, and public theologian. In 2015, he was recognized by Time magazine as one of the most influential evangelicals in America. Brian is a former college English teacher and pastor, and is currently a faculty member of the Living School, which is part of the Center for Action and Contemplation, founded by Father Richard Rohr. He either leads or is involved with many, many other projects, organizations, and initiatives. His latest book is The Galapagos Islands, A Spiritual Journey. He's pretty well known, I think, for one of his most recent books, This Great Spiritual Migration, which I'm excited to maybe talk a little bit about today. Thanks so much for joining us on the podcast, Brian.
It's great to be with you, Winston. And I should say, I think that Time magazine article was in 2005. Probably by 2015, they wouldn't have said that about me. But
okay.
but, yeah.
Sorry. Thanks for the correction. Yeah, it must have been a mistake on my part. Yeah. Great. So, yeah. Gosh, it's so difficult to know. It seems like I have tons of notes that I've been taking and wanted to talk to you about so many different things. I mean, because you're really a very, seems like you've written over 20 books, I think. Is that right?
Something like that. Yeah. I think I'm just overly talkative and long-winded, but I think it's about 20 now.
Yeah. Very well. Very well. Yeah, I think I've gotten through, at this point, the first one I read, right, was Why Did Jesus, Moses, and the Buddha and Muhammad cross the road? That was a little while ago, but most recently I read The Great Spiritual Migration, and also I'm working through Naked Spirituality as well.
Oh, great. Well,
yeah.
That's a good sampling of my work. I'm so glad.
Yeah, I'm excited to read more, as I go along. But yeah, it seems like you are a very you're saying really important things that resonate with me, and I'm sure resonate with so many other people, other Christians, and people of other faiths as well.
Well, that's encouraging to hear. I think there's a whole lot of us who we grew up with a faith that we inherited from our parents, or we accepted at a young age, and there are such great treasures there, but there are also problems, and so a whole lot of us feel we're going through a kind of sorting process,
Yeah. There's so many things, right, in the Great Spiritual Migration. I just feel like needed to be said, and I've wanted to articulate as well. And that's part of the reason I'm doing this too, is just trying to get this kind of message out. And so, right, to just kind of give that overview of that book. I mean, it sounds like you were inspired, right, by your love of birds and how they migrate, and the tradition of migration, even that we find within Scripture.
Yes.
And how this is actually something that has been occurring within the faith, the Christian faith, and probably also in other faith traditions, right? That living faith continues to grow and change and evolve, and that involves migration of one form or another.
Yes. I grew up Protestant, and one of our quotes that just about any Protestant learns growing up is Martin Luther's statement, "Here I stand." And so we have Martin Luther saying, "Here I stand here," and then the Catholic Church was saying, "Here we stand here." And so we have two groups in a standoff. And so for 500 years, so many different groups. And within Protestantism, we fragmented into 100 different groups, thousands of different groups, each of us taking our stand. Each of us saying, "I'm on the high ground. I've got it right. We've got it right. You're wrong." But what if the whole idea of taking a stand isn't really the picture? As you say, the whole Bible is a book of movement from, the creation, which is a process, an unfolding process, to Abraham, who's a wandering a wandering person. He's called to leave his home. His whole life is about a journey. Then you get to the Exodus. I mean, it's just all about journey. And of course, Jesus, what did he say? Foxes have holes and birds have nests. Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. He's constantly on the move. So,
Right.
and it's sort of sad that for a lot of us, the idea of religion has become associated with something that's regressive or nostalgic or stuck in the past, when really, I think when religion is at its best, it's a prophetic vision. It's a vision of the future, of a better world that invites us to lean forward.
Yeah, that's always been my intuition is, I've gone through my own process of deconstruction and questioning my own faith and all this stuff. It's always felt like there is hidden gems and gold and things that we should still hang on to and value as, again, we're going through so much transition and change in our society. And it's like we need some kind of grounding. And I think that
Yes.
our traditions, whether they're Christian or otherwise, can really provide that grounding for us. So I agree, though. It's a little sad that it's so difficult to really, in a way, to find a home.
Yes.
It's funny. I think we really resonate with this because I'm actually entering the ministry as a United Church of Christ pastor. I'm actually in the middle of a job search now. Strange time to be in a job search, but it's a second career for me. I was doing mental health counseling, and for large periods of my life, and even during counseling, I was doing sort of church shopping, right? And this one quote from The Great Spiritual Migration really resonated with my experience, and I think a lot of people probably as well. People like you, and you say here, people like you and me feel we're offered endless pairs of unacceptable alternatives. Ignorance on fire or intelligence on ice. Excessive certainty or insufficient confidence. Updated styles and structures with an outdated message, or an updated message with outdated styles and structures. A regressive movement or a progressive bureaucracy. Isn't that the truth?
Yeah, yeah. And of course, it doesn't have to be that way. And I think we'll get through to a better place. But that does feel like the unacceptable alternatives we're so often presented with now. I think obviously I'm a Christian, as you are, and I'm eager to see the Christian faith get its act together in this way. But can I just tell you a quick story?
Sure.
Just to help us remember that this is not just a Christian problem, it's a human problem. I was in Thailand some years ago with a group of people, and we went way up into the hills, and we were way, far off the beaten path. And we were staying at the home of this farmer in a little tiny farming village. And we got there a little late, we'd gotten lost, but she had all day been waiting for arrival, the woman who owned this house we were staying. And she wanted us to see the Buddhist temple in her town. It was a small but super ornate and beautiful temple. And so because we were late, I think the monk had gone home. So she contacted him and said, I'm going to bring my guests. So we go to the temple. Again, I'm calling it a temple. It makes you think it's something big, but it was the size of a garage, maybe.
Yeah.
A little bigger. But we go in, and there are beautiful statues around the room. And I'm thinking to myself, here, this Buddhist monk, this was not a tourist place, right? So this may be the first time he's ever met any non-Buddhists and who had people from the outside world visit. And the first thing he said to us is, and of course, this was through a translator. First thing he said to us, you'll notice that there's a raised platform here. Only men are allowed up in this platform. All of the women in this group need to stay on the lower level. And then the next thing he did is told us about who donated the different statues and how expensive they were. And I thought to myself, this is a Christian problem, a Buddhist problem. It's a human problem. And it's a problem in our civilization, because when you think about it, what we're dealing with, for example, with climate change, even what we're dealing with in a very intense way with the pandemic, science can tell us some truth that we need to adjust to. But if it's inconvenient, we all get nostalgic and we want to stay in our old ways. So I think it helps us. It maybe gives us courage and takes away some of the sting of frustration. If we say, no, this is a human problem. It shows up in religion. It shows up in politics, economics. But I'm so thankful that you're going into ministry, Winston, because we need you and we need anyone, everyone who is in the world of faith to help us lean forward and get out of these old nostalgic, deep ruts.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, I think it takes all of it. I mean, that's, I think, a lot of the encouragement that I've gotten, because I had my hesitations, right, about entering ministry, and it's voices like yours and many others, sort of the progressive Christian people out there that have encouraged me and said, I'm not alone. And that's the truth,
Yes.
that most of us we're not alone in this type of thinking, that there are other ways to make sense of Christian faith and our traditions.
Yes.
But it's amazing how hard it seems to be able to find a home, you know?
Yes.
I guess along those lines, right? It's like, it's funny because I recently was listening to your podcast on being, you're interviewed by Krista Tippett, right?
Yes.
At the Wild Goose Festival
Yes.
in North Carolina. And I didn't know about the Wild Goose Festival, but I was actually living in Asheville, North Carolina at the time.
Is that so?
Yeah,
Oh,
and
my
it was
goodness.
in 2013. Is that right?
That's right. You were just up the road. Yeah.
I missed it. Oh, well. And now, yeah, well, maybe I'll get back there sometime. But yeah, I was disappointed to hear that they canceled the festival because of the virus finally, just a couple days ago. But it was fascinating to hear, you know, the way that Cedar Ridge Community Church started, and I felt like there was. I'd love to hear you talk a little more about that. But I had a similar sort of experience where I had some friends who were sort of quote unquote unchurched, right, and who some of them had a Christian background. But we had been searching for a church and didn't necessarily find anything that felt like home. Right?
Yes.
And so we said, why don't we invite a few of our friends over on Sunday morning for coffee and just sit around in a circle and talk about what's God doing in your life, or just the things that matter to us. And people found that experience extremely profound. They said, there's really no space in which no other space in which to be able to talk about these types of things with anyone and to connect in this way. And some people were sharing things that, you know, were bringing up tears and stuff like that. And that's part of what that home church experience is, part of what motivated me to want to go into ministry. And I've been thinking a lot ever since about what the future of the church might look like, what other forms church might take, right? Dinner churches. And I heard you kind of touch on that, right, at the with Krista Tippett, talking about how it started as inviting people over for dinner, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, and you know, people often ask me about this, especially, you know, with the quarantine going on, and so many churches being closed, and of course some are opening up to the detriment of all their participants and everyone they come in contact with, and others have no idea how long they're going to be kind of shut down in their traditional form. And what that's challenging people to do is to become creative and innovative in ways that they wouldn't have if necessity hadn't come knocking on the door. Or maybe we should say if necessity hadn't locked the door.
Yeah, right.
And when people ask me what I think is ahead, what I would say is I think all of the above. I think we'll have mega churches in the future. I think we'll have many mega churches go out of business. I think we'll have house churches in the future, dinner churches. I think we'll just have every different kind. But here's what I think has to happen. We have to figure out what we're about. We have to figure out what our goal is.
Right.
And there are a lot of different ways to do that. And I don't think there's necessarily a one size fits all. But one way I like to say it in a Christian context is, what if we were to put everything on the line to say that our only goal that really, really matters is that we help people become the most loving version of themselves possible. Another way to say it is to become the most Christ-like version of themselves possible. Another way to say it is to actually help them become disciples in the sense of people who live the way taught and embodied by Jesus. Now, I think there are ways to do that in the 21st century world that are not in any way hostile toward other religions any more than they're hostile toward the history of Christianity, which has so many serious, ugly underbellies, right?
Right.
But there, I think there is a way to draw from the deep, deep well of Christian tradition and help people focus on really what really matters. And then we can say the way we meet and the liturgies we develop, everything is in the service of that larger mission. That to me is what will become very, very exciting.
Yeah, I agree. And by the way, for anyone listening, I think it's really, I think it was really important, and I'm glad I commend you for even naming the dark side and going into detail about the dark side of Christianity in your book, The Great Spiritual Migration, because I think, honestly, even a lot of people today still don't know or aren't aware of those things. And it's really important to look at those things, as hard as that experience is, for us to be able to see what the potential is there for really how wrong we can get it.
Exactly
It's
right.
astounding.
And especially, you and I are two white guys in the United States, and when you think about the fusion of Christianity and slavery in this country, and the fusion of Christianity and genocide and land theft from the native peoples, I mean, you just take those two things, and then you think that our religion has never really had a sober accounting. We've never really had the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that we need for our religion. And I remember some years ago, in fact, it was when I was writing Why Did Jesus, Moses, Buddha, and Muhammad Cross the Road? I went back and started reading some of the pro-slavery literature. Now, thank God, there's not a big market for that. But historians have been making some of the 19th, early 19th and 18th century pro-slavery Christian literature. They've been republishing it, and now you can find a lot of it online.
Wow. And
as I read that, I remember just it almost sent a shiver down my neck, to think, thank God I haven't heard anybody preach a sermon in favor of slavery, but the lines of argument and the way of using the Bible are identical. And now, of course, people use the Bible in the same way to stigmatize gay people, or they use the Bible in the same way to stigmatize people of other religions, or to oppress women, or whatever it is. And you realize our religion it's like we were presented with two alternatives. Either you read the Bible in that fundamentalist way that was used to justify slavery without any self-critical moral obligation to test that way of reading the Bible, or you throw out the Bible entirely. And to me, what could become very exciting is as a new generation of leaders comes along and says, we're going to help you read the Bible as grown-ups. And we're going to read the Bible with a sense of moral responsibility for how the Bible has been misused in the past. Because anyone who does research is going to find out that the death toll in the name of the Christian God, it's
right.
It's tens of millions. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah. I agree. I think there's right. It brings up all these questions, I think, that are so relevant even for today. I mean, one quote that stuck out to me as well when you were talking about this issue, that you say, no, we don't draw exactly the same conclusions as many of our ancestors did about slavery, oppression, etc. But you say, we have neither acknowledged nor rejected the method of reading the Bible that made those unacceptable interpretations acceptable. I mean,
Yes.
Yeah, it's like how are we going to educate and teach our people, our fellow Christians, how do we interpret and read the Bible in such a way that's not going to have these terrible results and implications? I'm asking myself that question now I'm curious to. I know you wrote a children's story. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, I have to get that because I have 3 young children of my own.
Yes.
2 boys and a girl, 7, 4, and 1-year-old girl, right? And I picked up the children's Bible that Desmond Tutu put out.
Yes.
Right. And
Yes.
even though I'm reading, it's like I'm looking at like the Noah's Ark story, right? And I'm like, from an adult perspective, I understand that through the larger journey, the larger story, we can see that actually the Noah's Ark story was progressive for its own time, right?
Yes.
But is there a way that I can share that story with my children I don't know if the answer is yes to that at all, because it's still, in today's context, right? It's a story about genocide, right?
Yes.
Mass killing. Yeah.
I mean, it's chilling, when you've never thought about that before. I grew up, accepting all of this,
Mm-hmm.
and then when I was a pastor, I would have people who weren't from a religious background come to my church, and they'd say, "Doesn't that bother you?" And I think about it, I never even gave myself permission to ask if it bothers me. I never even,
Right.
I never even heard someone feel free to express how it bothered them. And so, but that's going to be the default as we go forward. And this is one of the reasons why we need people like you who are willing maybe to start new faith communities, or to enter into faith communities that are ready for radical change, ready to have a kind of fresh, new beginning. Because here's the problem: the distance between where the average churchgoer is and where the average person that is searching for God and meaning and purpose, and we'd like to be able to give them a community, that gap is so big that if you try to split the difference, it will just make both groups miserable. And so what that I think is going to require is, there are some congregations that have already moved along and they're ready to go the whole distance, but there are a whole lot that aren't. And so what I think we have to do is help those congregations serve the people that they have, and nudge them along in the little incremental ways. But we can't be, that's not going to work for your peers. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why we need people to create new spaces, which in a sense goes along with the great spiritual migration. It's like we're always moving. So of course, I mean, this is even the language Jesus used. We're bringing new wine to the table. We can't just put it in the same old containers. It will blow them up.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so interesting. Yeah, we don't know what it's going to look like, but at the same time, there is this sense that people are hungry for it. I have a colleague that she's a pastor as well, and does a little bit of stand-up comedy, and she said that when some of the people in the audience, I guess, had figured out that she's a pastor, all of a sudden they wanted to ask her all these questions about theology and God, and she's like, wow, these people are really hungry to talk about these things. And that's been my experience too. After the day after I passed my ecclesiastical council, which felt like a big initiation for me. It's the ecclesiastical council is this where it's like the final, people publicly come to the church, and I present my ordination paper, and they ask questions in the audience, and I'm on the spot, right? And when they vote, right, whether to ordain you after that.
Yes.
And so after that, I decided to get a little tattoo of the UCC symbol, right? And just to kind of, commemorate the moment, right? And so I remember I got into a conversation with the people at the the tattoo parlor there, and they were, all of a sudden the owner came in the shop, and we were all talking about God, and we were talking about Christianity and the different ways that all the stuff that you've written your books about, and all these things, these issues are really just below the surface in people's consciousness and in their minds. They want to talk about, a lot of them, these deeper issues of life and why we're all here, right?
Yes. It's
Oh,
so true. And what people are surprised about is how hard it is to find a safe person to talk to.
yeah.
Um, I an analogy that comes to my mind when I was one of the early adopters of a hybrid car. So we were one of the early people to get a
Mm,
Prius, and I can't tell you how many times I'd be parking, to go into the grocery store, and somebody came up and say, "Hey, that's one of those Priuses, isn't it? Yeah. How do you like it? How does it work?" And what, of course, they could have gone to a Toyota dealership, but nobody wants to go to somebody who's going to try to sell them
mm,
first. You want
right.
to go to a customer who's using the product, who becomes a safe person, who will give you an honest assessment, right? They want what you might call a testimonial, not a sales pitch.
Right.
And and that's what people need. They need a safe person that they can talk to who isn't going to try to sell them something, twist their arm, and they need someone they can count on to be honest. Uh, and what makes so much sense to me about the story you just told, Winston, is that you went into a tattoo parlor where they probably don't have a lot of clergy come in.
Right. Right.
And there's a certain sense, because you're in their space, it shows respect and love and connection. And yeah,
Yeah.
that's what we need so much.
Yeah. It was really eye-opening and really affirming of the path that I feel like I'm on,
Yes.
you know? But I know, going back to something you said a little earlier, and something that you elaborated on in your book that I really loved, is your envisioning of the church of the future as primarily schools or studios of love, of
Yes.
teaching us how, like you said, to be the best, most loving people we can be. How do we learn to love each other and have more compassion for each other? How do we learn to see one another as Christ? Right.
Yes.
Gosh, and that's a question, right? That I'm always wrestling with, as we see our society is so divided, and
Yes.
as so many people, it seems are. I mean, it seems like some people are just hell bent on irrationality and destruction, and it
Yes.
makes you want to, um, draw a boundary, right, and say, "Hey, this is not okay." And it's always interesting. It's like we don't always know how to love others and what that love is going to look like. And
Yeah.
it's I don't know. I guess there's a question in there, right, about just how do we work with the people that just so difficult to work with.
Yeah, oh my gosh. I had a kind of a wake up call in this regard, Winston. I guess, what is it, almost 3 years ago now. I was invited to be part of the clergy counter protest in Charlottesville, Virginia. So I was there just up the street, and I was with the first responders who ran into the crowd after Heather Heyer had been killed.
Oh wow.
And it was a day I'll never forget, of watching mostly young white men and a few women mixed in, chanting Nazi slogans, anti-Semitic slogans, anti-woman slogans, carrying Confederate and Nazi flags. I mean, it was just it was surreal, a surreal
Mm,
day. But one of the things it made clear to me is that if people like you and me aren't helping people find a positive and loving meaning and purpose for their lives, and a sense of belonging in a community of love, they will be very susceptible to be drawn into communities of fear and hate and bigotry, whether it's nationalism or racism or even economic ideology. People can become horrible and cruel in their search for good things, meaning,
mm,
belonging, purpose, and so on. And so I came away from that, feeling this is not just a nice thing for churches to do. This becomes it's really a matter of survival. What Dr. King said, if we don't learn to live together as brothers and sisters, we'll die together as fools. And so we see. A friend of mine wrote a book called Compassion or Apocalypse, and
that's a good one.
whether it's compassion for each other or compassion for the earth, suddenly this is a life and death matter. And here's the interesting thing, that our churches could be at the very front. They could be the vanguard of this kind of work. And I dare to believe that they will in the coming years. Some of them will. I mean, others will double down on white Christian nationalism and all the other ugly stuff. But here's what it's going to require us to do. It's going to require us. See, we have two easy alternatives. I do work with the Center for Action and Contemplation, and the first major lecture I gave at the center, I said, look, this isn't the Center for Contemplation and Contemplation, and it's not the Center for Action and Action. When we say action and contemplation, how do these go together? And the same thing goes with love. People feel that to be loving means that we're peaceful, and to be peaceful means that we don't engage in conflict. But the fact is that the only way you cannot engage with conflict is to be silent and complicit. So part of our challenge is, how do we develop a spirituality that enables us to enter into conflict, but to do it in a loving way, and in a way that never demonizes it. I was with a Muslim leader last year, and I said, and he's a social activist in Detroit, and I said, how does your faith affect the way you do your social action work? And the first thing he said is, well, first of all, it never allows me to see anyone as beyond redemption. So even if I'm dealing with someone who hates me, I enter into the relationship not trying to vanquish them, but always keeping the door open, that even though I have to oppose what they're doing to hurt me and my people, I have to do it in a loving way in hopes that we could be reconciled, and that's all of that we could learn. My feeling is that the church would have to change its curriculum. And in fact, it would have to get a curriculum, because most of our churches don't really have a curriculum. And what we have is a liturgy, and we act as if that's just this checklist, like God wakes up every 6 or 7 days and thinks, gosh, I'm kind of itchy. I really need a prelude. And so we have this idea that we have to do these things to keep God happy or something. Well, no, liturgy is for our own formation, and it's a gift from God for our own formation. So what would happen if our liturgies were geared toward helping us become those kinds of loving, transformative peace agents in the world? And that to me, that's why this thing matters so much.
Yeah, gosh, I feel like you've said some really important and good points right there. I mean, just the fact, right, that once again, returning to this theme, that this is something that people are really hungry for, and that is actually part of the reason why we see this manifesting in destructive ways. It's really a desire for connection, for community, for understanding the world, and grounding. I mean, it actually almost reminds me of something you said in the Why Did Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad Cross the Road, where you talk about this sense of Christian identity. On the one side of the spectrum, there's weak and benign, and then there's strong/hostile, right? And I think at one point you're just saying that a lot of fundamentalist Christians really just want to have a strong faith identity. They want to belong. I mean, it almost reminds me of somewhere I've heard, somebody make sense of gangs as, well, it's kids on the street who have nothing and oftentimes come from broken homes and families, and they're looking to have a family. They're looking for initiation and all these things that historically our religious traditions have provided, and now we're missing that. Yes. So absolutely. And
this, it just speaks to so many problems that have so many different levels in our culture. But it's going to take people forming communities, multi-generational communities, where older people don't sit around complaining about young people, but get to know them and love them and serve them, build relationships with them, believe in them, help them, where people cross racial barriers, or people cross barriers of social and economic class and so on, and to me, at that point, the Christian faith becomes a migration or an adventure, because suddenly I'm being invited into the unknown. And, when I look back on my life, I grew up in the church, and I remember a moment when I was in about 7th or 8th grade, and I remember thinking, there's only 3 or 4 sermons I ever hear. Like they have a different Bible verse attached to them, but there's read the Bible more, pray more,
Right.
come to church more. You know what I mean? There's this handful of sermons, and I thought maybe for the rest of my life I'm never going to hear anything new.
uh,
And,
yeah.
and then I think now, though, gosh, 52 Sundays a year, that's just like we need every single one of those because there's so much we have to learn to be more loving people. There's so much we have to learn to cope with the insanity that's going on around us. There's so much we need to learn to heal from the trauma that we've been through in the last few weeks. Like this becomes super important, super important.
Yeah, it reminds me actually of, I have this kind of joke with myself really that I'm going to mention Alan Watts in every single episode because I'm a fan of Alan Watts. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's a philosopher.
It's so funny. I quote him in the book that I'm just finishing right now.
Oh,
yeah.
Really? Great. I can't wait to read it. Yeah, I'm a fan. And at one point in one of his talks, he said, the sermon in church, 52 Sundays a year, is "Dear people, be good." We've heard it ad nauseum, he says.
Yes.
But the question, he says, is how? How
Exactly.
do we love each other? We know we need to be loving. We know we need to love each other, but how? And I think for him, really, it was seeing this interconnection, the interconnectedness of seeing that the other is not truly other, right? The other is the self that we're all a part of. But I think you're right in saying that the church doesn't maybe necessarily have a curriculum. I think that's one of the things that's attracted me and many others to the Buddhist tradition is they seem to almost have, I think it's a little esoteric and to a lot of people it's like unfamiliar and foreign, but there is a little bit more of, okay, here's the method, and that's maybe also why centering prayer has become more popular because we do need curriculum and I think some of your books should be on that curriculum.
Well, thanks. Well, it reminds me years ago, a Methodist theologian named George Hunter. We were talking, and he told me that in fact, I think he wrote this in one of his books. He had met a couple who had just started coming to church, and they were non-religious, and they'd been baptized, and so on. And he said to them, "Well, how's it been since you've been part of the church?" They said, "Well, it's been good, but we kind of feel like we're bowling and they won't let us see the pins." And I think that just catches it so well. Like we're here and we're trying to do good, but we're not exactly sure what the point is. It's one of the things I think that helps explain why yoga is so popular. Because if you go to a yoga class, you find out there are these different poses. There's downward dog and there's sun salutation and there's, and you realize, oh, if I'm going to be part of this, there is a curriculum for me to learn. I'm going to learn how to do these postures and I'm going to learn how to go gracefully from one to the other. And I'm going to learn how to enter into each practice with intention. And so you get it. Oh, here's what I'm here to learn. And unfortunately, what I think we're growing out of in the Christian religion, fortunately, we're growing out of this, is that so much of what the Christian agenda was let's get your soul into heaven after you die. And this sort of avoiding hell and going to heaven was the obsession of the Christian religion for hundreds of years. I think it's misplaced. I think it's misunderstood. I think it's a cart before the horse. I think it's all kinds of problems in that. But we got to the degree we get rid of that, all we're left with, as Alan Watts said, is, oh yeah, be nice, be good. Mm-hmm. And now we're saying, no, actually, I want to be good. I want to be loving. Let's say I want to be a peacemaker. How do I do it? And guess what? There are real skills that we can learn, and there are real practices that we can engage in. And it kind of starts with setting up the pins or naming the postures. And that's the work that is, I think, waiting for us to do.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thought, and I think you're right. It's like I think a lot of people maybe are weary of that because there's this sense of, I think, the way that spirituality, religion has been exploited by people who say, okay, there's a hierarchy, right, and this person's on top. So there's a danger to that in a way, but it's right. It brings up a lot of thoughts. Like as I've thought about how many churches out there put up the signs, everyone is welcome here. And how many
Yes.
of them actually mean it, right? We
Yes.
could debate
Yes.
that. But then I thought about how, take martial arts schools, for example, right? You go
Yes.
there and you start out as a white belt. And,
Yes.
and then there's a skill set, like you're saying, that you have to learn. And then
Yes.
so that, there's a contrast between certain schools, which will give you a black belt in, say, 6 months or a year, versus one where it takes you, say, 10 years to get. Then
Yes.
it's a really meaningful experience to get that
Yes.
black belt. So, I mean, I'm not trying to say that I don't know how good it would be for there to be a hierarchy within the church, right? Like in that sense of like, oh, this person's better than that person. But I do agree with you. I think that we're all on this journey of development to become more Christ-like, to develop as human beings, and there are real skills that ought to be mastered if we are to move forward as a society, as a world, as
Yes.
a human species, right?
And it's not like the Christian faith has tried this and failed, or tried this and nobody was interested. It's that we literally have been way busy doing other things. It hasn't been our primary focus. And so, in that book, Great Spiritual Migration, I basically say, well, look, here's a start. Let's identify our curriculum. How do we love God? How do we love our neighbor? How do we love ourselves? How do we love the earth? I actually propose it in a different order. How do we love our neighbor? How do we love ourselves? How do we love the earth? And how do we love God? Because I think we actually learn to love God through the encounter with neighbor, self, and earth. For example, imagine if you could say to people, we have a 4-year cycle here, or we have a 4-part curriculum, and every year we spend 3 months focusing on how do we love our neighbors, and we spend 3 months focusing on how do we love ourselves. Or every month we have, the 4 Sundays are broken up around these things.
Yeah.
And so by the end of the year, we've actually thought through that there will be 52 things, specific steps, specific practices that you learn here. Man, people would think, oh, I don't want to miss a week,
Right. Yeah, that sounds very exciting. Yeah, I mean, one of the things we had thought about, my wife and I, was even just changing the environment of church. Like one day, it was actually I still remember when we got the idea. It was last summer, and we were at the pool. We're in an apartment complex here. I went down to the pool, and I was thinking, wow, this is a really nice atmosphere, and there's music playing and people just walking around. And I just thought about how many people enjoy just going to Starbucks or to Panera or to all these cafes or restaurants, and just to be in this environment in which it's comfortable. You can sit down, you can have some food around the table, and engage with one another. And I thought, what if church looked like that in terms of
Sure.
the whole environment was sort of, maybe there's bookshelves with spiritual books on the walls, and different conversation prompts and things like that, where the whole environment was structured in a way to really bring people into this kind of conversation, and you have the it's open not just once a week, right, but throughout the week, and there's
Sure.
groups, book studies and different themes and talks and panels and whatever,
This is where life and ministry could become so creative. So as you're well aware, there are groups called dinner churches that are happening, breakfast churches. I talked to a woman not too long ago. She dropped out of church. She'd been a lifelong churchgoer, dropped out, but went to all the neighbors in her neighborhood and said, we're going to have something called breakfast for dinner every Tuesday night. And everyone's invited. And all we're going to do is get together and have pancakes one night and eggs another night. And, so that was sort of the deal, breakfast for dinner. Adults, children, everybody's invited. And we're going to have a topic for conversation each night and have a short conversation everybody's allowed to be part of. And she said that, they thought it would go on for once. And then they said, well, let's try it 4 times. And she said it had been going on for a couple of years. And what they discovered, people were hungry for exactly what we're talking about. And
Right.
And I think the possibilities are endless. Can I tell you 2 quick anecdotes?
Go for it. Yeah.
I was in Dominican Republic some years ago, and there was a really interesting pastor, Pentecostal pastor there, who really developed a passion to help people in poverty. And he was in an urban area. In fact, there are a lot of poor urban areas in the country. And so one of the things they realize is young people don't have anything to do. And when you don't have anything to do, drugs and crime and all the rest become a problem. And so they started a series of basically health clubs or exercise, gyms, small storefront gyms. And they got basic equipment. And then whenever you would sign up, whenever you come to sign up for this, they made it very affordable for people without much money. And they said, whenever you sign up, you get a chaplain as part of your membership. So, I'm the chaplain of this health club. So you're here to develop yourself physically, but we also want to help you develop spiritually. If you're having problems with your family, I'm a chaplain of this health club. So they didn't call it a church and they didn't call it a pastor, but this was a beautiful way of making connections with people and helping them. I saw, and so totally separate from that, I was in London some years ago, and there was a guy who had started a skate club for neighbors, for kids in the neighborhood, because they were always coming and skating there was a sloped driveway or sloped parking lot, and you can imagine skateboarders and everything else were doing it, and they were all worried about liability, and the church elders or leaders put up a fence, and then they said, this is ridiculous. We have this land, why don't we use it? So they just got insurance and people had to join. And when you joined, same thing. They said, when you join, we have a chaplain for the skate club. And so now suddenly these people had a connection, like you were talking about in the tattoo store. They have a connection. And now there's somebody who's there for them and isn't asking them, you've got to believe this and this and this and change this and this before we'll help you, but saying, we're here for you where you are and let's go. To me, that's exciting.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. I think it highlights too, partly that a part of the problem has been, a lot of Christians have been, you either, accept the whole thing, all or nothing, yeah. And instead of recognizing that where people are at is people are all these different mixed places and figuring out the journey. Yes. And most of nobody has all the answers, and we are having that humility. I mean, I do think, right, though, like we're talking, structures are not necessarily bad because it's funny. I think we learned about how at one point I came across something that talked about intentional communities, people who decide to live together. Yes. And the ones that seem to fall apart rather quickly are the ones that don't have any rules or structure, right?
Yes,
it's
exactly.
It's the strictest ones with the most intense rules that tend to actually last longer, So all of this needs to be taken into consideration. What can we learn from the way that certain evangelical contemporary mega churches are doing things, and what can we learn? There's something to be learned everywhere, but
that's right. There's skill involved. And one of the skills is knowing what are the appropriate rules for what we're trying to achieve, and what are the appropriate structures. And this is where anybody who just says, this is what I'm inheriting from the UCC or the United Methodists or the Roman Catholics or the Jew or the Reformed Jewish community, whatever, if they just think somebody's going to give them a package that people are going to flock to, they're going to find out that's just not true. We're in a time where we have to draw everything we can from our past traditions. And I would say not just religious traditions, explicitly religious traditions. I think we have so much to learn from the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and we have so much to learn from social movement theory. All these things can help us as we move forward in this vital mission and in this scary and dangerous time.
Right. It's like, it's a very complex, there's so many complex aspects to this. Yes. And at the same time, I'm, like you mentioned, A and NA, and I'm thinking of the home church that I had in Asheville and the simplicity of it. No liturgy. Yes. There was no predetermined format. We were just kind of like very informal, very little structure, and yet the simplicity of just being together in a space and sharing a meal or sharing a conversation in an intimate way. it's like that helps me sometimes when you get overwhelmed with certain aspects of complexity to remember, hey, some of this is really quite simple. Of let's just get together and make the space for this to happen.
Yes.
But God, I mean, one of the things that really stood out to me too about just talking about the power, the potential of what church can really be. You said it so well, I think, when you had been talking about social change and on four different levels, right? Cultural, etc. And you say, now imagine if you wanted to find an organization well positioned to encourage change on all of these four levels. Whom would you call? You would need an organization that was both local and global. It would need to involve people from all sectors of society, agriculture to government, healthcare to education, for-profit to non-profits, science to the arts. It would need to specialize in personal development, community building, deployment for mission and public communication. What organization could fulfill these diverse requirements, right? And then you say a couple sentences later, the gap between the church's potential and its actual impact can make you cry, And it's true, it's so true.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah, I think, it's understandable to me why a lot of people have given up and why a lot of people have walked away. Totally understandable. But here, what they're going to find out is, yeah, there are a lot of problems there. But look, there are a lot of problems that aren't going away just by leaving the church.
Right.
And who do we expect to fill the gap, right? So this, and I don't think we can say, oh, the church will fill the gap. Because the church is just people, and some of the people are part of the problem. I mean, there are people who are identified as Christians, who are racist, who are homophobic, who deny the reality of climate change, who hate, if they're liberal and they hate conservatives, or they're conservatives and they hate liberals. I've come to think that the label Christian has very, very little meaning. People can define that in so many different ways. But when we talk about people who actually have a deep connection of love to the Spirit of God in the world, and they see that Spirit radiant in Jesus, and they want to be part of a community that's living that out today, man, that's needed. That's so important. For personal reasons, I can't go into too much detail on what I'm about to tell you, but I've been a little discouraged about some churches lately, and two churches that I sort of track. They've been going through a rough patch, and right at the point where I was about to lose hope, both of them have taken this amazing turn for the better, and that's, to me, it's just a reminder that if I give up hope, I'll, what's the old saying? You might, give up when you're 10 yards away from the finish line, So if you hang on a little bit longer, you might find out that there's new possibilities.
Yeah. That reminds me of something you said in your book towards the end about the whole Exodus narrative and the universal message of that, of being before the ocean, right? And feeling like, okay, there's no sign of the ocean parting before you, and you have enemies behind you pursuing you, and you can't stay where you are, right?
Yes.
But somehow finding that sense of faith or trust that if you, I forget the Hebrew phrase for it, but get going, right?
Yes, exactly right. Exactly right.
Yeah.
You step into the water and the water opens. That's right.
God says, get going. Yeah.
Yes.
Gosh. Oh man. So such good stuff. Yeah. I don't know, as we kind of near the end, would you like to tell us at all about your latest book, or maybe some of the project? I know you're always working on so many different things. I know you probably have a couple of books you're working on, right?
That's right. So since The Great Spiritual Migration came out, two other books have come out. One is a book for children that we mentioned, that's called Corey and the Seventh Story. It's really a book for adults as well. It's a book about peacemaking, and it's about 7 stories that frame our lives. It's beautifully illustrated and co-written with a friend of mine from Asheville, actually.
Oh, wow.
So that's available if people go to my website. And then I had the this most delightful surprise. I was invited to go to the Galapagos Islands and write a book about the Galapagos Islands and offer theological reflections on anything that came up there, from ecology to evolution to capitalism to all kinds of things. So that's really one of my funnest writing projects. So that's available. But my next book is called, I should also say, I have a short ebook folks might be interested in that's about why our brains are not wired to accept the truth. And it's called Why Don't They Get It? Overcoming Bias in Others and Yourself. So that's on my website. But the projects I'm working on now, I have a book coming out in January that if people are interested in, they can actually pre-order as of a day or two ago. It's called Faith After Doubt. And in fact, there's a wonderful quote I have there in that book from Alan Watts, where he makes this wonderful distinction between what he calls beliefs and faith. And he says beliefs is like looking out the window and deciding some days it's sunny, some days it's cloudy. I want it to be sunny. So you take blue paint and you paint a blue sky on the window. Whereas faith is saying, no, I want to encounter the reality that's really there and find, I want to open the window and see what's really there. So anyway, that's called Faith After Doubt.
Right, and he's saying, don't take the blue paint off because it's such a pretty picture that's been painted on the window, right? But not seeing that the real sky, the real sun is shining through the window on the other side, right?
Yes.
Great.
And then the book after that will be called Do I Stay Christian? Those are the projects I'm working on now. But Faith After Doubt will be out in January, and folks can pre-order.
Great. Thank you so much for being on the podcast on Second Table, Brian. Appreciate your time.
Well, can I say, people like you who are doing this good work of creating space through podcasts for needed conversations to happen, I'm so grateful. I'm a big fan of podcasts, big fan of you, glad to meet you, glad for the journey you're on, and honored to be part of it today.
Thank you so much, Brian. It was a blessing to have you on, and hopefully we'll get a chance to talk again sometime soon. All right. Great. Thanks for everyone for listening. Bye-bye.